Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at a company called Tonix Pharmaceuticals, ticker symbol TNXP. They develop all kinds of therapies and vaccines for a range of conditions. We'll be going through their financials and much more as we try to figure out what makes this company tick. And stick around, because later on in the show we're going to reveal a really fascinating detail about Tonix, one that you probably wouldn't expect from a pharmaceutical company.
Sounds pretty intriguing. I'm ready to dive in.
Okay, great. So let's start with the basics. What does Tonix actually do?
Well, at its core, Tonix really focuses on developing licensing and commercializing therapeutics and vaccines. They're not just like aiming for one blockbuster drug. They're really trying to build a whole portfolio of different products.
Okay, so that's a smart strategy, spreading the risk a little bit. So where did Tonix come from? Give us a little bit of history.
Sure, so their story begins back in 2011. They were founded through a reverse merger, and they've had their share of hurdles over the years. In fact, back in 2022, they actually had to fight to maintain their NASDAQ listing, but they pulled through, which shows a certain amount of, tenacity.
Yeah, it takes grit to survive in this world for sure.
Yeah.
So what are some of their key areas of focus right now?
Well, they're really making a big push in central nervous system disorders, specifically with their lead candidate, TNX-102SL, which is aimed at treating fibromyalgia. And as you may know, that's a condition that affects millions of people and has a really significant market.
Yeah, I've heard it's really tough to treat fibromyalgia. So going for a large market and a potential treatment seems like a good strategy, but are they putting all their eggs in that basket? What about other areas?
Not at all. They're also involved in things like immunology, infectious diseases, and even rare diseases, developing solutions for a really wide variety of needs, which again is a good sign in terms of, diversifying their portfolio.
Sounds like they're covering a lot of ground. But how are they actually generating revenue right now?
Well, they do have some existing revenue streams coming from migraine medications that they acquired. But the real excitement, I think, lies in their pipeline of future treatments. That's where I think their potential for growth really shines.
The classic biotech play, banking on the innovation. But they're not operating in a vacuum, right? What's the overall pharmaceutical market looking like these days?
Yeah, so the pharmaceutical market is huge, and it's growing rapidly. The global market is projected to reach something like $2.8 trillion by 2033. And this is really fueled by factors like aging populations and advancements in medical technology.
Trillions of dollars. It's hard to even fathom that.
Right. And Tonix is strategically positioning themselves within this massive market, targeting specific niches that have high growth potential. For example, the fibromyalgia market alone, where their lead candidate, TNX-102SL, is positioned, is expected to reach $4.13 billion by 2032.
Wow, that's a pretty significant slice of the pie.
Yeah.
So what other areas are they targeting?
Well, they're also working on vaccines and treatments for things like monkeypox and smallpox, which is becoming increasingly important given the, global kind of context of biodefense these days.
Right. With all the uncertainty that's going on in the world, that's definitely top of mind for a lot of people. Anything else?
Well, this is where it gets a little intriguing. In the midst of the opioid crisis, Tonix is actually developing a potential treatment for cocaine intoxication.
Wow, that's not something you hear every day. Most pharmaceutical companies are focused on, opioids, not cocaine. That's a pretty bold move.
Yeah, it's a very unique approach. They're also developing a treatment called TNX 1500 to address organ transplant rejection, which is another area with a huge unmet need. And they're even venturing into, the very hot topic of long COVID, with some potential treatments there as well.
Sounds like they're really trying to stay ahead of the curve and tackle some of these emerging health concerns. But let's face it, the pharmaceutical world is notoriously challenging. What are some of the headwinds they're facing?
Oh, you're absolutely right. The competition in this space is fierce, especially from these large established players who have massive resources. Regulations are extremely stringent. And getting a new drug approved can be an incredibly long and costly process. And on top of all of that, there's constant pressure to lower drug prices, which can obviously squeeze profit margins.
High risk, high reward, as they say.
Yeah.
What makes you think that Tonix has what it takes to overcome these challenges?
Well, I think their focus on unmet needs is a major advantage. It gives them the potential to be first to market in some of these areas, which, as you know, can be huge.
That first mover advantage is definitely a big deal. Anything else that sets them apart?
Well, their innovative drug delivery technologies are also, I think, a key differentiator. For example, their sublingual formulation for TNX-102SL. That sets it apart from other fibromyalgia treatments that are currently on the market.
So delivering the drug under the tongue instead of like a pill or an injection, that's pretty innovative.
Exactly. And it's not just about what they're doing internally. They've been really smart about forging strategic partnerships with, government institutions, research organizations, and other biotech companies to really leverage expertise and resources.
Makes sense because this stuff is so complex you can't do it all yourself. But all this research and development, that sounds expensive. How are they managing that aspect of the business?
They've invested in a really strong R&D infrastructure, cutting-edge facilities, and they have a pretty solid intellectual property portfolio as well. They hold several key patents, which gives them, I think, a competitive edge.
Okay, so they got the brains, they got the resources.
Yeah.
What about the people running the show? What's the story with Tonix's leadership?
Well, their leadership team is comprised of seasoned executives, people with extensive experience in the industry. CEO Seth Letterman, in particular, has a very strong track record in drug development and commercialization.
Yeah, you need that experience to navigate this complex world. But they haven't been immune to challenges, have they? What about that reverse stock split back in 2024? That must have been a tough decision.
It was. They essentially had to combine existing shares to boost the individual share price in order to maintain their listing on the NASDAQ. It's not always a positive sign, but it was a necessary move at the time.
I can imagine that was a tricky situation to navigate.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're proactive about addressing the challenges they face.
They are. They've been actively securing funding, streamlining expenses, and keeping investors informed through a transparent investor relations program.
Transparency is key, especially in biotech. So how are they allocating their capital? Where's the money going?
Well, they're investing heavily in their core business and research, of course,
Yeah.
but they also made a strategic acquisition of some migraine products,
Yeah.
which is actually generating revenue while their pipeline develops. It's a smart way to kind of balance their short-term needs with their long-term growth goals.
Sounds like they're thinking strategically. Any other interesting kind of quirks or details about their spending habits?
Yeah, well, they've chosen to work with contract manufacturers for the potential launch of their fibromyalgia treatment, Tonix, which kind of indicates that they're planning ahead. They've also initiated a share buyback program, which demonstrates their confidence in their own value.
Share buybacks can be a good sign. Are they paying dividends to investors at this point?
Not currently. Their focus is really on reinvesting those earnings back into the company to fuel future growth, which is pretty typical for a company at this stage of, development.
Okay, let's talk numbers. What does Tonix of financial health actually look like right now?
Well, their market cap, which reflects the company's overall size, is $80.36 million. Their revenue over the past 12 months is $11.29 million. However, they are currently operating at a net loss of $116.66 million.
Okay, so not profitable yet. Not uncommon for biotech companies that are in the growth phase, but definitely something to keep an eye on. What about their debt situation?
Their debt-to-equity ratio is 11.71%, so indicating they are using some debt to finance their operations.
Okay, so a mixed bag on the financial front. They got some revenue coming in, they're investing strategically, but they're still in the red.
So we just went through Tonix's financials, which, as we saw, are a bit of a mixed bag. But now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how the market is viewing this company.
Yeah, investor perception plays a huge role in a company's success, especially in the world of biotech, which can be pretty volatile. So it's the overall sentiment around Tonix right now.
It's mixed. You have some investors who are really excited about their potential, particularly, their focus on those high-need areas like fibromyalgia and that cocaine intoxication treatment. But then you have others who are a bit more hesitant, mainly due to their, financial performance and also their history of stock volatility.
Yeah, those are valid concerns. I mean, investors want to see a clear path to profitability. And when a company has a history of stock price swings, that can definitely make people nervous.
Right. And I think that's reflected in the range of analyst opinions out there. Price targets for Tonix are all over the map. You have some as low as $2.50, others as high as $11, with an average target of $5.83.
Wow, that's a pretty wide spread. It seems like even the experts are having trouble, pinning down Tonix's potential.
Yeah, it really highlights, I think, the uncertainty that surrounds the company and kind of reinforces that high-risk, high-reward nature of this type of investment.
Okay, so let's dig into some of those specific events that might be fueling that uncertainty.
Right.
What news has been impacting Tonix's stock price lately?
Well, one of the most significant developments was the FDA's acceptance of their new drug application for TNX-102 back in December of 2024. That's their potential fibromyalgia treatment.
Okay, so that's a big deal, right?
Absolutely. It means they're one step closer to potential approval, and they actually have a PDUFA goal date of August 15th, 2025.
Hold on. For those of us who aren't familiar with all the ins and outs of FDA terminology, what exactly is a PDUFA goal date?
Basically, it's the deadline for the FDA to make a decision on whether to approve the drug.
Okay, so August 15th, 2025. Mark your calendars, folks. That could be a big turning point for the company. So what other news has been moving the needle?
Well, they've been expanding their commercial leadership team, which suggests they're preparing for a potential product launch. But then, on the other hand, you have that reverse stock split that we talked about earlier, which some people view as a bit of a red flag.
Right, it was necessary to maintain their listing, but it also raised some concerns among investors.
Yeah, exactly. And another factor to consider is short interest, which was at 8.52% as of January 15th, 2025.
Okay, remind me, what does short interest mean? And why should investors care about that?
Sure. So short interest basically means that some investors are betting against the company. They believe the stock price is going to go down, so they're borrowing shares, selling them, and hoping to buy them back later at a lower price and profit from the difference.
So it's a measure of how much negativity there is surrounding a stock.
Interesting. So it seems like Tonix has its fair share of, supporters and skeptics.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads us into ownership structure. Who are the major players holding Tonix stock?
Yeah. Is this a company dominated by big institutions? Or is it more of a retail investor play?
Well, institutional ownership is actually quite low, only around 0.23%.
Wow. So the vast majority of shares are held by individual investors.
That's right. And insider holdings are also relatively low, which indicates that even those closely involved with the company aren't making any major moves with their stock at this point.
Huh. Interesting. Seems like a lack of conviction one way or the other, both from institutions and insiders. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's kind of wrap things up with the SWOT analysis. What are Tonix's key strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats?
Okay, starting with strengths. Tonix has a really diverse pipeline of products, targeting a range of unmet needs. They're not betting everything on a single drug, which I think is a smart move to mitigate risk. Yet diversification is key in such an unpredictable industry like pharmaceuticals. Okay, so what about weaknesses?
Well, their ongoing financial challenges are definitely a concern. They need to turn those losses into profits eventually to ensure long-term sustainability. And then, of course, there's always the inherent risk associated with any pharmaceutical pipeline. There's no guarantee that their products will get approved or that they'll be commercially successful.
Yeah, the FDA approval process is notoriously difficult.
Yeah.
And even if a drug does get approved, there's no guarantee it'll be a hit in the market. Okay, what about opportunities? What are some potential areas of growth for Tonix?
Well, those upcoming FDA decisions could be major catalysts for growth, particularly if TNX 102 SL gets approved. They also have the potential to expand into new markets and forge, new strategic partnerships, bringing in additional resources and expertise.
So lots of potential avenues for growth.
Yeah.
But every company faces threats. What are some of the biggest risks for Tonix?
Well, competition is definitely a major threat. The pharmaceutical industry is incredibly competitive, and Tonix is up against some really deep-pocketed giants. They also face potential regulatory hurdles. The FDA can be unpredictable, and any setbacks in the approval process could be a major blow to the company.
Right. Navigating that regulatory landscape is a constant challenge. Anything else?
Yeah, market volatility is another risk factor. Biotech stocks in general are known for their dramatic swings, and Tonix is no exception. And finally, there's always execution risk. They need to execute their plans flawlessly in order to really succeed.
So to sum it up, Tonix Pharmaceuticals is a company with a lot of potential, but also some significant risks. They're targeting some incredibly important areas of medicine, but their financial situation is a bit precarious, and they face some really tough competition. So before we reveal our final thoughts on Tonix, let's take a moment to remind you to subscribe to the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel for more in-depth analysis of fascinating companies just like this.
And don't forget to drop your stock suggestions in the comments below. We love to hear what companies you'd like us to cover in future deep dives.
Okay, now back to Tonix. Given everything we've discussed today, is this a company you think is poised for success?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and unfortunately, we can't give financial advice. Our goal here is to equip you with the knowledge you need to make your own informed decisions.
Exactly. But we can offer a final thought to consider.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's your parting wisdom?
Well, what really stands out to me is Tonix's focus on innovation. Their pursuit of these novel treatments for conditions like fibromyalgia and cocaine intoxication is bold. And it has the potential to make a real difference in people's lives.
Yeah, their commitment to addressing unmet needs is definitely something that sets them apart.
But here's the catch. Their success hinges on their ability to overcome those financial hurdles and navigate the complexities of the pharmaceutical industry. It's a high-stakes game with no guarantees.
So it all comes down to execution. They have the ideas, they have the technology, but can they deliver?
Exactly, and that's what makes Tonix such a fascinating case study. It's going to be really interesting to see how their story unfolds.
I agree. Well, that concludes our deep dive into Tonix Pharmaceuticals. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
And remember, the information we've shared is for informational purposes only, and it's not financial advice.
Always do your own research and consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Investing involves risks, and it's important to be informed and make thoughtful decisions.
And with that, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Tonix Pharmaceuticals.